Hey there! If you're an American citizen, then you must be ecstatic to know that all your government is being controlled by a secretive group of people who absolutely have no interest in improving your life in any meaningful way. It's the AIPAC and Israeli lobbying. Just kidding, it's American Christians themselves.
Israel, fasten your seatbelt. You're seeing Bible prophecy fulfilled in your lifetime, in real time, before your very eyes.
We shouldn't be shocked and surprised that Satan is still at his same goal, because prophecy talks about how Messiah will come back again.
In short, it's American evangelicals who are so blind in their support for Israel that they ignore their own fellow Americans, all for a prophecy that most Christians would find to be absurd. But where did this ideology of radically supporting Israel come from? And is the present-day Israeli nation the same Israel mentioned in the same Christian Bible? Welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, glad you could come. This video is not about attacking any religious groups of people, but to bring light to a specific group of people who have massive influence over American policymakers and are responsible for carrying out an all-out ethnic cleansing in the Middle East right now, and are also responsible for thousands of deaths in the region. Not only in Israel, but in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and basically destroying these countries for decades to come now. In short, it all begins with the Protestant Reformation back in the 1500s, which in very simple words was a revolt against the Catholic Church, rejection of the papal authority in Rome, and the promotion of the idea known as sola scriptura, which encouraged Christians to read and interpret the Bible, while before the Reformation only the Catholic clergy was allowed to interpret and preach the Bible, and the clergy was essentially seen as the link between God and Christians. Protestantism rejected that and wanted to get rid of the bridge and establish a direct connection between Christians and God. A lot of other major things happened in the Reformation, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to leave it at that, and that's all we kind of need to know for this video. One of the results of the Reformation was that some Christians concluded that the return of the Jews to Israel had to be mandatory to trigger the second coming of Christ. Christian Zionism in America specifically came into force by a man named John Nelson Darby all the way back in the 19th century, who preached this fancy ideology called dispensationalism, which in simple words divided all of human history into distinct parts called dispensations, in which God interacts with humans in different ways. I'm not a preacher nor an expert in Christianity, but in simple words, dispensationalism teaches that before Christianity, God mainly dealt with the Jewish people and the promises tied to the land of Israel. But with the coming of Christianity, a new dispensation began in which God deals primarily with the church. According to dispensationalists, God will once again return his focus back to Israel in the second dispensation. This is why the modern establishment of the State of Israel is seen as so important for dispensationalists. Now let me remind you, this was a radical new way of interpreting the Bible at that time, and the Catholic Church opposed the dispensationalism and believed in a single plan for God, and that was through one covenant fulfilled in Christ and his church, and with no future separate dispensation for Israel, and that the Christian church replaced Judaism with the coming of Jesus. But it doesn't matter, because this dispensationalist theory became very popular, especially among American evangelicals. And why did that happen? Because of the Bible, and not just any Bible, but a modified Bible written by this man called Scofield. Hey, just quick, if you're enjoying this video, then please consider to like and subscribe, as it helps out a lot. And getting back to the video now. The Scofield Bible is a fascinating piece of Christian literature and is certainly very controversial. In short, it's a Bible commentary or a study Bible. Now keep that in mind. In fact, it was the first English Bible which had commentary alongside the biblical text instead of being in a separate book, which was more of the norm back in those days. Scofield himself was a dispensationalist, and his commentary was basically Zionist talking points, and it helped massively popularize Zionism, especially within American evangelical circles. The Bible said that God's promises to Israel in the Old Testament are still valid and unconditional, and that the church is a separate entity from Israel, and Jews would return to their ancient homeland before Christ's second coming. There had been multiple well-documented sources that Schofield was funded by several powerful American Zionists at that time, and one of them being Samuel Untermyer, who was one of the most prominent American lawyers at the time who funded his work to back the international Zionist movement rising at that time. And it clearly worked. By the end of World War II, almost 2 million copies of the Schofield Bible were sold, and it was a massive hit with evangelical circles, and Christian conservatives, and the establishment of Israel in 1948 reaffirmed dispensationalist ideas even more and helped legitimize the Israeli state. And the evangelicals cheered as they claimed that it was a part of God's plan. After the Six-Day War in 1967, when Israel defeated the Arab world, just like David had defeated the Goliath in the eyes of American Zionists, evangelicals saw it as prophetic, and Zionism was fully entrenched in American political landscape ever since then. All of these leads us back to the present day, where American political interests are Israeli political interests, and both are in a sort of mutual relationship. Now, who is getting more out of this relationship? Well, at this point, most people would tell you that it's Israel. But that being said, I think we definitely downplay a lot of American interest. America is not innocent in this case and never was in history. It would rather fund Israelis committing genocide against Palestinians rather than invest in its own people who are experiencing a deteriorating quality of life just because it can and it wants to. For example, people love to point out lobbying in American politics, and particularly name AIPAC, which emboldens Israel's position and literally helps supply unlimited funding to Israel through American taxpayer money. One thing they conveniently fail to mention is that the AIPAC is an American organization whose numbers are overwhelmingly American, some Jewish and many evangelicals, as I mentioned why before. All of these pro-Israeli lobbying groups are American-run by American citizens operating legally under lobbying laws. They are not registered as foreign agents, and it's not foreign lobbying but instead a domestic case of lobbying. Am I denying Israel has no interest in lobbying American politicians? No. They definitely are involved in this big time, but it's time to pretend that most of the people doing these dirty works are American under the American flag, and most of these are American evangelical Christians and not American Jews participating in these. In fact, it's been bloody clear that the white American evangelicals counter the number of American Jews who have Zionist views, which is just bloody absurd. I hate this recent phenomenon where people are supposedly waking up and figuring out Israel controls the US government, when the matter of the fact is, it's just another excuse to portray America as this innocent little baby who is being manipulated by some evil power. A lot of people think Israel is secretly controlling the United States, and while it sounds good on Alex Jones, the radical truth is that Israel is a part of the United States itself, and the entity of Israel cannot exist without the US. In the end, this issue isn't about some evil Israeli organization secretly lobbying American politics and media to make Americans support Israel more, but lobbying is done by Americans against their own fellow Americans. And we need to destroy this argument because it makes common good-to-do Americans feel powerless against their own politicians and institutions. Americans did this by themselves, and only Americans can undo the damage. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. Please do me a small favor and like and subscribe to the channel to support me to make more future videos for you guys, and take care.